Hey everybody, Matt Halpern here with episode 16 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. On behalf of myself, Justin Goodman, and Jordan Goodman, we really appreciate it. Now, before we kick into this episode, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone in our Facebook group. You guys seriously continue to kill it each week with the awesome support for one another and the engaging conversation and motivation. From what I can see, you're all pushing one another, you're sharing your truths, and it's really quite inspiring to witness. If you're listening and you haven't joined the Chocolate Croissants Facebook group, I'd really encourage you to do so. You can find the group at www.facebook.com/groups/chocolate-croissants. Please don't hesitate to join us there, chime in the conversation, ask us questions, make some new friends, and get inspired because it's, as I said, a really supportive place to share your creativity, to share some of the challenges you may be going through, and just connect with like-minded people who are looking to better themselves. That's what I'm really seeing there. So if that sounds like you, please join us. I also want to take a moment to give a quick shout out to Rode Microphones. These guys continue to support us, and the products are the reason why we get to broadcast to you each week. You can learn more about Rode's podcast microphones and all of their other products at www.rodemic.com, or you can check them out via their socials at RODEMIC or at RodeMic. Now, on to this week's episode. Our guest is the incredibly talented Mike Dawes. Mike is one of the busiest and one of the most prominent fingerstyle guitar players in the world. He travels the world about 10 months of the year, performing on stages both huge and small. This dude jumps out of airplanes when he's bored. He never turns down a chance to have a memorable life experience, and I know that firsthand. And he does it even if it means absolutely no sleep. He's the definition to me of a self-starter. And it was really fascinating to hear him talk casually about everything that he does on a daily basis. It's pretty baffling. He's extremely organized. He's extremely focused. And he knows exactly what he wants out of his life. And he works his ass off to stay true to that vision. There are so many great lessons and nuggets of inspiration in this episode. And the fact that Mike is British and has this lovely voice to listen to really makes this 90 minutes of content quite digestible, in my opinion. But seriously, Mike is a great guy. I met Mike a couple years ago through touring with Periphery. He is good friends with some of the guys in my band, and I can't stress enough how much of a good friend he really is. Any chance that he can come out to come see us play, anytime we're even close enough, he reaches out, we get in touch, and he makes a really strong effort to get together. And I think you'll understand sort of how impressive that is and just how admirable that is, I guess, once you listen to this episode. So I'm going to zip it now. I will let you guys get into this. I'm excited for you to hear this one. The conversation definitely added a ton more fuel to my fire, and I really hope that it does the same for you. So without further ado, here is episode 16 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast featuring my good friend, Mr. Mike Dawes.
Hey, nice to hear from you, dude.
Yeah, dude. Well, you know, it's funny. I remember when we were in London for the last Periphery show, I think you said to me, when are we going to go chocolate croissanting or something like that?
Man, that was a fun show. Dude, congrats on that show, by the way. That was a real special moment.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I'm pretty baffled by how that show turned out. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad you got to see it. A lot of people have been coming up to me randomly, like online, and giving me lots of praise for that show. And in fact, I was at the Warped Tour the other day and I ran into these guys from this band. I can't remember the name offhand, the Gospel Youth maybe, who are from the UK.
Oh, sick.
They were at that show, I guess. So I don't know if you know who they are, but yeah. Anyway.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Nice, cool. Man. Yeah. I mean, I grew up going to shows at that venue, so it was pretty cool to see you guys headline.
So for me and all the listeners, can you help give us context to what this show was, Mike?
Oh, okay. So this was a Periphery headline show in London at the Forum, which is I guess it's one of the biggest venues in London that isn't like an arena. You know what I mean? You got the Forum, you got Brixton Academy and Hammersmith, and it's that kind of size venue. And I believe Matt could probably confirm this, but I believe it was your biggest show like ever, right? Like biggest headline.
Yeah, that was definitely our biggest headlining show.
Yeah, it was pretty sick. And yeah, I mean, I've seen you guys play pretty much every time you've come to the UK, at least for a long time. And it's just, gets bigger and bigger, man.
So how'd you guys end up meeting?
Dude, we met in Montreal, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Where was it at La Tulipe or was it another venue?
It was, yeah, I think it was that. So basically, I was on tour in Montreal at the same time with this tour called International Guitar Night, which is basically like a bunch of guitar. It's like G3, but for acoustic guitar, you know? And I just looked up to see who was in town, and I saw Periphery were in town, and I knew Nolly from like back when I was at school, like back when I was at university, right? He used to come around the house to hang with a housemate of mine. And yeah, we sort of hung out, met up in Montreal, I think the day before your show, and just had a pretty rowdy night, really.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Mark Holcomb about I kind of reached out to him to see if there was any specific stories that we should dig into. And he mentioned a couple things regarding, I think, Montreal, but we won't bring those up.
Yeah, I got you, man. I got you.
Anyway, well, that's cool. Well, so yeah, so Jordan, me and Mike go way back, and Mike is also really good friends with Mark Holcomb from my band as well. And really, you're friends with, as you said, with Nolly and all of us. I think you and Mark have probably spent the most time together. He talked about when you guys, I guess, went like snorkeling or scuba diving for his wedding, right?
With a scuba diving instructor called Spanish Wolverine. Yeah, that was a good time. Yeah, I went to his wedding with Vanessa over in Spain. That was a good time. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's weird, man. I mean, I tour a lot, much like you guys. I mean, we're in very different scenes, but at the same time, there is a bit of a crossover. But for whatever reason, we just seem to always be in the same place. Like in whatever country it is, in whatever like coast of the USA, I always seem to cross paths with you guys. I don't know why. But, you know, fortunately, you're all cool guys, so we kind of get on. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. On this last tour, it was just in London. I think it happened.
Yeah.
There wasn't another location, though, was there?
No, but the previous tour, that was Bristol. I mean, we've met on the East Coast, on the West Coast. Like, I mean, just the other week, I was in Vegas, and Mark and Jeff were in town, you know. It's just pretty random. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll bump into some of you guys next month as well. I'm going to be back in the sort of Maryland, D.C. area for a little bit, for a few shows. So. Yeah,
I saw you're playing Jam in Java in Vienna, Virginia.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I haven't played there before. I mean, like, I'm coming over to do this sort of festival this sort of like festival guitar competition thing I'm judging in Wisconsin. So tied on a few East Coast shows to that, which will be a lot of fun. It's always a good time on the East Coast. People there really kind of get the whole guitar thing over there.
Yeah, I think you'll really enjoy the venue. I've played there years ago, but probably about a half dozen times. And
oh, sick!
The venue staff are incredible. The town is nice and clean, and there's just a lot of good sightseeing as well. Yeah, and you'll be treated well there.
Oh yeah, looking forward to it. In fact, yeah, it's Vienna, Virginia, and I think Mark and Vanessa and I think Markides came out to a show I did there at Wolf Trap Barns like 2-3 years ago. In fact, yeah, man, actually, that show, I played your song Scarlet as a duet with an Argentinian, like 70-year-old tango master as a duet. And it was so sick. And I remember Markides and Mark were there and they were just like, what just happened, man? Like, that's pretty random.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that actually. I don't remember where I was, but I actually recall you being in town for that, being down at Wolf Trap, and that's a really sick venue to play. And okay,
yeah,
so
good spot.
So you know, whether it's with whether it's for your solo career or for the other artists you work with, I mean, it seems like you've played some pretty iconic and huge venues and done some pretty crazy gigs. Is there like a massive gig that sticks out to you?
Well, yeah, it's really, really weird, dude. I mean, a lot of the venues that are memorable for me, they're not particularly massive in the sense, I mean, I'm not a band. I'm a solo guitar player. The biggest venues I would play are like kind of reasonable sized theaters, But I mean, just last night, I played in Lexington, Kentucky at this thing called Wood Songs, which basically goes out live on the TV and the radio to like 90 million people or something ludicrous, So that was kind of fun. But like things like the Troubadour in LA and the Blue Note in New York, and yeah, last week I played at the Bluebird in Nashville, which is kind of this legendary kind of singer-songwriter spot. So it's not like Wembley Arena or anything like that, but in the acoustic circuit, I've definitely been fortunate to play some pretty iconic places for sure.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so let's go back a bit. I mean, you've really made a name for yourself as an independent artist, and I can't imagine that's easy because you're doing everything yourself. And I know that you have a lot of skills that go along with just your ability to perform and carry yourself well in front of an audience. How did you even, when was that moment when you were younger that you were like, I'm going to make this into a career and I'm going to go head first into this?
Yeah.
What was it, a conscious decision like that? And if so, was there a strategy, Yeah,
it's weird, man. I mean, like the scene that I'm in, right? This kind of acoustic guitar instrumental thing. It's not, first of all, the scene itself is pretty small. So I guess I'm a certain sized fish in a small pond, right? And with that comes a limited infrastructure anyway. So even the labels that associate with this scene, they have kind of, there's a ceiling on the kind of power that they have anyway. Or at least that's how I was viewing it. So, I mean, I'm a perfectionist and a control freak. I mean, I stand on stage alone playing music by myself that I've like written and released, and letting people into that circle for me is a really big deal. I really have to trust someone to let them in, to work with, and the thing is, I enjoy it. Like, I enjoy the thrill of being on my laptop, doing emails and organizing a tour, or booking my flights, or doing, my own guitar tabs, or writing and recording and all this stuff. I enjoy it. Like, to a lot of people, it's laborious. It's something that they want to delegate, but I actually am thrilled to do it, So that's one thing. Another thing is, I actually released my first record with this small label in Wisconsin, but the second record I'm just about to release in September, I realized that over these 4 years of touring, I kind of have all these contacts myself now, I mean, I know the editors of the guitar magazines. We're mates, there's no real need to give someone else a cut. So I actually started my own record label as well, which I'm in the process of kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on right now.
So you're describing this, I guess, intuitive entrepreneurial spirit, but I'm curious, is this something that was expressed maybe at a younger age in some other way, or was it just music was first and this was a necessity in order to share your gift with the world?
Sure. I mean, I guess there's a few things. First of all, I've always put travel and music as an equal part of what makes my life enjoyable. I want to go everywhere, meet everyone, do everything. I jump out of planes, I go flyboarding, I do stupid stuff. And music is also self-expression. It's very important for me to do that. So I decided at an early age that I wanted to try and combine the two and be a touring musician, not just a musician, but a touring musician. That's of equal importance to me in terms of my own happiness. And also, when I got my first break, I released my first single. It went viral on YouTube, right? Now, obviously, we're in 2017. Like, we can do things like that. We can release music and have the world share it for you. You don't need infrastructure to have a viral video. You just need people that like your stuff. And it was then that I kind of really realized that all you really need is people power. I mean, you can have a PR, you can spend thousands of dollars on PR to push things down people's throats. But at the end of the day, if people aren't willing to share it, it's only going to go so far. So if you're writing content that is genuine, that people want to share, you honestly don't need that much of an infrastructure. So,
Mike, you're referencing that Gautier cover?
Yeah. I released that in like 2012, and it kind of went super mega on me. And a few other videos as well, at least the equivalent of going mega back then, which was sort of, a couple of million views in a day kind of vibe, where now you can get like 20 million views on Facebook for, a cat sneezing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was a real testament to the fact that the people have the power. And that's true of musicians as well. This is one of the reasons I've decided to set up my own record label and take this big risk with my second album, rather than saying yes to another deal with a similar label and having that security, because I want to be on the ground floor. This is without a doubt the way the industry is going. The power is with the musicians. It's just a fact, and it's only going to get more with the musicians, right? I want to be in a position in 10 years' time where I have an established system in place where I can record, release, do this, do the graphics, do everything myself, and not have to share the profit with anybody, really, other than obvious things like, merch printing and blah, 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 blah. I want to minimize that. And yes, I'm a control freak, and yes, I am super stressed a lot of the time, but at the same time, that thrill gives me enjoyment. And as I said, I have a phone, I have a laptop, I have an iPad. You can do this I'm sat in a child's bedroom in West Virginia right now, staying with some friends after finishing a tour. They're all out at work, and they just let me crash at their place for the day. They're all out. I'm sat here next to the router doing this interview with you guys, and I love it. I mean, I'm sat here with some great people. We're going to play some Nintendo 64 tonight. Life's good. It's all fun, and it's also thrilling that I've made that happen myself, and I haven't. It's all work I've done myself and the public's response. No middlemen.
Side note, I've been playing Mario Kart 64 a bit more over the past few months. It's fucking amazing, man.
You know what's terrifying is this girl, Riley. I'm staying with my buddy Spencer, his daughter, Riley. She's freakishly good at it. Like, we're always first and second place. I sometimes come and stay here at the end of a tour or something just to wind down. And we have a proper vendetta. I mean, I'm slating her with witty, brutal English banter, and she takes it. They love it. We have a good little thing going on. So who's your driver of choice?
I never really got emotional about that because I never was super big into video games growing up, especially when the 64 came out. That's when I kind of fell off. So I've actually never developed the skill of kind of the double joystick. So I can't do any of those like first shooter games. By the time I'm trying to adjust my perspective, my head is blown off.
Yeah, man.
But I think maybe like a Yoshi.
Dude, yeah, Yoshi's cool. I'm a Toad guy.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. It says so much. So a lot of the things you're talking about, just being an independent entrepreneur and relying on yourself as you project kind of 10 years into the future where you could create the most leverage for yourself. These are a lot of things that we've been talking about on a bunch of these episodes. But I know that many of our listeners right now are listening and thinking, oh, well, it's easy for someone like Matt to start a podcast, or it's easy for someone like you to have your own record label when you already have a platform, right? So you did have to get to a certain point. Obviously, you lucked into this idea that a video went viral, even if you had all the talent in the world. So what would you say to listeners who kind of have that counterpoint in the sense that, well, it's easy for you to say?
Well, first of all, I kind of completely disagree with that because everything that I've done, there's been no real advantage to having any sort of infrastructure because I've never had the infrastructure in the first place. That's the thing. I mean, if you say it's easy for you to say like, oh, Matt's in a band, he can have a podcast, but the dude grinded his ass off to get to the position he was in the band anyway. Relating that to my situation to do with infrastructure and doing things myself. I mean, I take this Gautier cover for an example, which went viral. I did that arrangement because I had a shitty breakup. I know that's such a cliched musician thing to say. So I arranged at the time the world's greatest breakup song, which is Somebody That I Used to Know, right? I know it's such a cliche, such a snowflake thing to say, but like I did it and I grinded through it in like 2 weeks. It all just came out super genuinely. There was no mentality of this is a popular song, therefore people might like it. It was all a completely genuine form of self-expression. And then the next day I recorded it. The next day I shot the video. This is all off my own back, my own budget and everything. And then I basically gave it to this YouTube channel to release. That's the thing. the label's YouTube channel, that's all it is really, or all it was to me at the time, was a YouTube channel. There was no investment in the project. I presented them with this fully formed piece with video, with tab, with everything. They just put it on YouTube and it went viral. Now, yes, they had a few 100,000 YouTube subscribers, but the real thing that kicked it off was me sending it out, because they didn't really do publicity. It was just putting it on the channel, but I sent it out to things like the songwriter himself and all these other places, and Reddit and things, and that's where it kicked off, right? The only difference between sort of myself now and myself then is using a YouTube channel which had about 100,000 more subscribers than I have right now. That's the only thing, right? And to be honest, I'm not really willing to pay, say, half my royalties for, in perpetuity for that privilege. And the amount of work that you choose to put in by yourself more than makes up for that. And like, honestly, to anyone listening, you can do this yourself. There's no such thing as easy for you to say if you're grinding, like you're always grinding. I'm not in a super big position. I'm not Tom Emmanuel or even Andy McKee. I'm still just some pretty unknown UK guitarist, but I grind. That's the thing. You've got to be willing to enjoy every aspect of the business side of being a musician, but always remember to have something genuine to say.
So that was actually going to be my question, Mike, because you talk about the business side of things and grinding, and so much of that is not the travel portion where you get to have those experiences. It's not staying with friends. It's not performing on stage or recording videos necessarily. You're going to do all those things, but there's a ton of work underneath that, like underneath the surface. So, a couple questions came to mind when you were talking about everything that you do. And even if we're just talking about starting a label or releasing a new record, what's your method for keeping track of everything? Are you a list keeper? Are you a scheduling guy? What's your, do you just keep everything in your head? What's your method to really stay on track? But then also, and I think I know the answer to this, but it'll be good for the listeners to hear. What's your motivation on a daily basis that forces you to grind? That pushes you to grind. So it's a two-part question. So basically, how do you manage it all? And how do you stay in it? Yeah.
So first of all, it would be a complete lie to say everything's great all the time and it's a really happy experience all the time. Like, it is an extremely stressful thing to do yourself. So first of all, I will say this. It's not a breeze. It's not easy at all. I am not particularly disciplined with my own schedule, and I'm not a list keeper. I keep too much in my head, and that is an additional stress that I should not do, and I'm aware of this, and it's something that actually this year I'm trying to change. I'm trying to change my method, and I've started to write things down a little bit more right now. The thrill of doing it keeps me going, but also understanding that there is honestly no such thing as a bad idea, only bad execution. And what I mean by that is, this was a phrase that kind of popped into my head last night, actually. What I mean by that is, if you have a lot of things that you want to accomplish today, and you're a self-employed musician with no right or wrong answer, there aren't necessarily deadlines. You know what I mean? There's no path that is correct versus a path that is wrong. But you can do any path well if you work hard at it. So as long as you understand that it's okay to take a break, it's okay to take a day off, right? As long as what you end up doing is executed very well. Does this make sense? Maybe you can relate to this, Matt. I mean, it gets really daunting sometimes, doesn't it? That there are so many decisions that you could make, and you just have to pick one and go with it. Like starting this podcast. This is just a shot in the dark, really. You're just having fun, but you're executing it with passion and with grind, right?
Yes, absolutely. For me, I kind of, I follow my gut feelings, and I argue with myself, and I debate things with my partners on the projects that I'm a part of, because it's sometimes very hard to rely on my own idea and then decide on a strategy from there that is just going to work, Yeah. So Go ahead.
I was saying, like, so you bounce ideas off with other people, right? Does that, you find that helps you in sort of decision making like this?
For me, it does. And, let's take the podcast for an example. When we released the first episode, there had already been a ton of back and forth between myself, Jordan, and Justin about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to present it and what was good and what wasn't. I mean, we have episodes that we recorded that hopefully will never see the light of day because they were, in my opinion, in our opinion, they just weren't really up to par. They weren't bad, but they just weren't, we didn't have our footing. And even in the first few episodes, we didn't have our footing. So we made a point to create essentially a community on the Facebook group to where we can get direct feedback from our audience. And what's great is that's one kind of feedback that you can choose to look for if you are starting something. If you're very
absolutely
if you're very honest with your audience and you ask them to provide input, most of the time they will. But
right.
Then there's other things too. I mean, I always bounce my ideas off of people that I trust who I think are smarter than me and who typically have better ideas than I do. I'm lucky to have some really smart friends, and some of these people, Mike. We're both pretty lucky to have some really smart friends. And when I have something I'm thinking about, it always helps to just get a gauge of that temperature. It doesn't necessarily mean I'll agree with what they have to say, and their opinion doesn't dictate whether I move ahead with something or not, but it's more data for me to analyze and more input for me to think about and maybe tweak some things. So yeah, I mean, that's how I do it, It's really
interesting because, for the benefit of the listeners, if you're starting your own thing, whatever it is, being an artist, being a musician, an actor, whatever, it's doing your own thing. It is important to grow that thick skin and be okay to look for criticism and accept that people will have other ideas. There's no point, say, writing a piece of music and only asking your mum if she likes it, because she's going to say it's the best thing ever. You know what I mean? And that's where having a good support team, be it actual business partners or be it just friends, like you say, smart friends who will tell you how it is. I mean, there were some songs I cut for this new album that didn't make the cut, simply because I played it to a few people I really respected, and they were just honest with me. They didn't get the vibe, and then when I went back and listened to it maybe a few weeks later, I kind of agreed with them. So what you're doing, I guess, with the Facebook group and getting fan feedback or audience feedback is really, really smart. And honestly, that's something that I see you guys doing. But by you guys, I mean the sort of periphery circle, in the sense of we have a lot of friends that are sort of based around this scene, not necessarily in your band, but friends that I've made through that particular scene, and they're all very, very smart, tech savvy guys. And I actually learn a lot watching you guys work, and it's really interesting how you do really genuinely respond to audience feedback. So yeah, if you're listening, tell us we're shit. Basically,
we can
it's
take
okay.
it. We can take it. I share publicly often, and I do these drum circle based empowerment programs, and I'll often give out feedback forms. And I really need to encourage the people I'm working with to really think about constructive criticism. And I'll tell them, I can take it. And in fact, if you're going to demonstrate true love, tell me what didn't work or what you wanted more from me. Because that's the only way that I'm going to be able to learn how to add more value to the people that I serve.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's constructive criticism is very important. I mean, any solo venture or even a venture with a small amount of people, say solo venture, you're the least objective person in the entire world about that particular venture. It's impossible to remove yourself from the situation entirely and see it for what it is. I mean, take a complex piece of guitar music as an example. I mean, you're focused on playing this thing. I mean, you can't be 100% focused on listening. That's where feedback is really, really, really important.
So, Mike, this guitar thing for you, where the hell did that come from?
This guitar thing. So I guess for the benefit of the listeners, I play acoustic guitar sort of solo on stage in a slightly unusual way, where I try and kind of play the bass part and the harmony and the melody and the percussion kind of simultaneously. It's a small but growing scene, but for me, it's always been a about writing music without other musicians rather than standing on stage and doing some party tricks. Basically, I'm from a small town. It's as simple as the fact that there weren't many other musicians around that wanted to jam. I just kind of, the short version is I started messing around by myself because I wanted to perform and I wanted to travel. And the acoustic guitar, when I discovered that when I was about 17, it changed everything, because suddenly it was everything just clicked. It was a diverse box. I was big into electric guitar before that, but the added element of the hollow body just created a lot more. It pun intended, vibrated literally much better with me. It resonated better with me, and I sort of combined my love for heavy music with my love for sort of Celtic music and fingerstyle guitar, and I guess that approximates something close to what I've been doing professionally for the past sort of, I guess, 4 or 5 years now.
So it wasn't until 17 that you made that switch. That blows my mind, considering how successful you've been.
Oh, that's really kind of you, man. I mean, I was playing electric guitar since I was 12, and then 17 was when I wrote this tune on an acoustic guitar, and that's actually the tune that I've opened pretty much every single gig I've ever done with. It's kind of it's a sort of a safety blanket, I always open with that. It makes me feel safe. But yeah, that was actually written 10 years ago to the month. Something interesting about that is the process of actually writing that song. I actually developed tendonitis. I don't know if that's something that's interesting to your listeners who are musicians and perhaps suffering with repetitive strain type injuries, but I went through all of that, and that was a real tough time when I was 17. I couldn't play guitar for about 8 months because of that. So there's been lots of hurdles along the way, and I think probably some psychological issues as well that mean that I don't let anyone else into that inner circle. But right now I'm in a happy place and doing a lot of recreational travel as well. Still haven't decided where I want to end up living, though. I'm a bit of a nomad, living out of a suitcase most of the time.
Well, I'm curious, in those 8 months, what did you learn about yourself as far as maybe coping skills, or did that allow you time to explore other interests, or even to realize that this guitar thing was the thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, before the tendonitis, I actually had another injury that put me out for about a year. When I was 15, I severed my fingertip in a door. So one of my fingers of my fretting hand is actually sewn back on, which is pretty gross. But it's kind of cool because I have limited nerve sensitivity in it, so I can kind of shred for hours with that finger. Yeah, I mean, I've never had a backup plan. I mean, any injury or setback is just that. It's a setback. I've never had anything else that I wanted to do with my life, and I've been very fortunate that my mum and dad, who I lived with through my adolescence, like most people, were just like, okay, that's what he's going to do. And they were never the kind of people to say, what is your plan B? And I think the fact that I was never exposed to the mentality of having a plan B, I think that's what kept me going mentally, if that makes sense. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a plan B, but for me, just it was a single tunnel vision the whole time. And these injuries were just, hey ho, well, when I heal, I'm going to do this, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that. Did you guys have a sort of backup plan in place growing up?
I did not really. I mean, I always knew drumming was going to be the thing. I just didn't know how it would manifest itself finally. Of course, I have other interests too, but for a long time, I had to make drumming the main and only focus and kind of have that be the umbrella, and then figure out what else I could put underneath the category of drumming. There was one thing that I wanted to ask, actually two things. So, one, are you an only child, Mike?
I'm not. I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister who's 2 years younger. Okay,
gotcha. And two, kind of along that same direction, and kind of with the question that Jordan was asking in a way, over that 8-month period, I'm sure that was challenging for you. And what, I like being in a band because when I travel, I'm kind of with a big group. It's like a nice big clique of people, and there's always someone to hang out with, and there's the camaraderie that's built. But I mean, you do a ton of solo travel. How did you get comfortable with that? I mean, was that something that was ever scary for you, working by yourself and doing all these things by yourself, or have you always been just completely comfortable with yourself being independent?
That is a really interesting question, because I think about this quite a lot, I think the solo aspect of travel for me has been a means to an end, the end being travel. I love to travel so much that traveling solo isn't really anything that would put me off doing it. But at the same time, even though I'm on stage alone and taking the flights alone, that's the solo part, is taking the flights. I'm never really alone when I'm at the location. I will always be met at the airport by, say, the other musicians I'm touring with, or the promoter who I've become friends with, or even at this stage, now I've been doing it for coming up to 5 years, friends that I've made in those countries and in those cities, So now, I mean, although my first trip to Asia, I was solo, but then I've always been very comfortable socializing and meeting people. So now I go back there again, and suddenly I'm staying at those guys' spot or hanging with them and their families. And it's always the first time going to a new place. I guess the part of it that could be considered isolating is actually replaced by the adrenaline of going to a new place and the thrill of that. Whereas then the second time, the time I return, I've already made contacts and friends there, because I'm just kind of quite a social person. I was never a social person growing up, which is what's quite funny. I, like many other musicians, spend their teenage years just in their room playing instead of really going out. Whereas now I sort of use that as almost I wouldn't say a defense, but a means to being very extroverted when I travel. So that's the kind of the way I deal with it. The first time I go somewhere new, I've got the adrenaline. I'll be thrilled to meet people, and then when I go back, I've got friends there already. And honestly, something that I would really encourage any listener to do is travel outside of, if you've never left your comfort zone, be it your hometown, your home city, even your home country. I'd really encourage people to do that, because say I grew up in a very small town with a pub, an English village town, and it would always be the same group of people, and they were my friends, and that's great, and I do love these people. But there are people out there in the world that I haven't met yet. There are people out there in the world that I have met through travel who I click with on another level, be it musicians or just good-hearted people, and I consider these people much closer friends, even though I may only see them once every 2 years. And that, for me, I put up there with the thrill of travel and playing music, being able to connect with people that I connect with on a deeper level than I would have if I had been afraid to travel by myself.
I can really see the metaphor in jumping out of a plane, because that's something that I've personally committed to do. Hopefully in the next, I guess by summer's end.
Oh, do it! It's the best.
But for a lot of people, I mean, obviously, as social creatures, we cling to a comfort or habit. And that's why so many people may stay in the same career for 50 years, even if it doesn't really light them up, or even the same relationship or the same town, to your point. So there really is a lot of vulnerability and risk in the lifestyle that you've chosen. So I'm wondering, do you feel a sense of security in it, or do you maybe just get off in that lack of having some sort of foundational either place to live or even relationship? So you're saying, do I thrive off risk? Yeah,
essentially. Yeah. I mean, right now I'm 27. I turn 28 in a few days, and the short answer is yes. I've said yes to literally play shows in territories where ISIS have a strong presence for like barely any money. You know what I mean? Like in the traditional sense of, would you like to take this risk? We will give you this much money or whatever. I say yes to things like this because it's thrilling, and I put experience above anything else, be it money stuff or at this stage, relationships, although you could tie relationships to experience, I absolutely 100% thrive off having no safety net. I mean, the first time I went to Asia, I mean, I'm sure I can say this now on this podcast, but I won't mention the country, but I went there, let's say, less than legit, if that makes sense to any kind of traveling musicians out there. The kind of thing where you would just give your passport to a random guy and get it back when you left. You know what I mean? Just really dodgy. And again, I'm taking a little risk saying this, but I've bribed officials in certain parts of the world, but you know what? I wouldn't change that for anything, because that's a kick-ass memory. You know, I mean, I haven't hurt anyone. Not to my knowledge, I haven't done anything that is selfless to the point of affecting other people in a negative way. I think that is the bar that you need to always be very aware of, right? You've got to always be good to everyone. That being said, as long as that's not being affected, I'll jump without a net for sure. At least at age 27 right now, I'm saying that, yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of listeners hearing your story and thinking, oh man, Mike must be fearless, right? And now, there's a difference. There is a difference between playing a gig where there's a presence of ISIS versus choosing the career path and the lifestyle path that you've chosen for yourself. Both, will create a sense of fear naturally for us, but it's really in what we do with that fear. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are envious of you and would like a similar lifestyle and probably, to be honest, have the talent to live that lifestyle if they so choose. But for some reason, there is something that's holding them back. So I'm curious, when you do come up with that fear, or maybe resistance is a better word, how have you learned to manage that and deal with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of this came at the beginning. I guess going back to my earlier point, now a lot of the places that I'm going to, I'm already sort of set up socially, and that removes a lot of the element of risk and, by association, fear. But when I first started, I think my way of easing into this world was maybe hold some insight here. When I released that first video and it went off, took off online, I had all these offers of tours come into my inbox from all over the world. In fact, the very first one was from Lebanon, going back to my previous point. However, they were also saying, where's the album? And I was saying to myself, well, I can't tour without an album. I've got to have some merch. I've got to have something to promote. I've got to have more songs to play. At that point, up until that point, I was in this relationship where I was playing duo music with an ex-girlfriend. And when we split up, all my repertoire went with her. So I only had this one arrangement that I'd done, somebody that I used to know, right? So what I said to all these emails was, yes, I would love to come, but give me 1 year. And in 1 year, I will be there and I'll have my record. So what I did through that year was I wrote my debut album, which currently is the only album I have. I'm releasing the new one on September the 15th. I wrote that album at the same time as learning to book these flights and put these little gig offers in place manually by myself, right? So I sort of had this stacked series of, say, 4 months worth of tour dates the following year. And that's what happened. So it got round to April the 9th, 2013, the album came out, and the first show was April the 13th in Germany. And then I've kind of been on the road ever since. So I think that year gave me this kind of, hands-on approach to looking at every aspect of how does one travel. What do you do at an airport? Where's the check-in desk? You know what I mean? Like, how much baggage can I take? What's the weight allowance of this airline? What visas do I need to go here? And because it was a gradual process of a year based on a sure thing, and the sure thing was going to these places because I had offers. I think that's the difference. I think if it had been shooting in the dark and having the motivation to try and organize myself without any kind of end game in place, maybe I wouldn't have had the confidence to go through with it. But because I literally had in black and white, do this by this date and you will come here, that gave me that extra layer of motivation to do that. Does this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that seems like such a luxury to really have that year to get your shit together. That's
exactly right. I mean, it's very unusual that you would release something to sort of get offers before you've actually released something, it was so random. So I think that maybe that holds some insight into that process, rather than sort of trying to pitch a record to the press and getting some offers off the back of that and not knowing where it would go. I had a certain amount of employment, shall we say, in place. And also I was teaching guitar full time at the time. So I started by going out and doing sort of hit and runs at the weekends. And then after a few months, it got to the point where I had to quit. And I knew I had enough months worth of touring employment to sustain myself if I were to quit my teaching job. And that's kind of been how it's been going ever since. I'm on the road maybe 10 months of the year now for the past 4 years or coming up to 5 years. And I normally go home for December. And that's kind of how it's been. Yeah.
So the teaching's something I wanted to get into. That's something all three of us have in common, in that we teach music. But what
Sure.
You and Matt have more in common is that you've really leveraged both your platform and audience, but also your ability to travel around the world in order to share the teaching as well. I was checking out your website this morning, and you promote different ways to connect in more of a teaching or lesson format. So is that something that was a means to an end, just because you're trying to find ways to monetize your skill of guitar, or was that something that sharing it with someone else has always lit you up in a way?
I mean, honestly, it is both. For me, teaching is something I really enjoy. I mean, my solo show is actually a lot of communication. I spend a lot of time on the mic talking shit, really. And teaching is sort of a way to talk shit at people, but for them to actually get something out of it. So I do really enjoy teaching. I do the on-tour lessons. I know Matt does this very often. You still do on-tour lessons, right, Matt?
Yeah, pretty much on every tour. Yep.
Absolutely, right. When I do teach on Skype as well, but it's very rare now because of the touring. And I also occasionally do these things called cottage clinics, where when I am back in the UK, people come up to the cottage in the west of England where I am and sort of spend the entire day doing a sort of one-to-one clinic. I also have like apps on the App Store and things like that. So there's lots of teaching materials out there, like I mentioned earlier, Guitar Tab and stuff. Honestly, in terms of the fulfillment of the gratification of people responding to your creative output, one of the most gratifying things, I'm sure Matt will agree, because we play quite technical music, is seeing someone on YouTube having gone through all that time and effort to learn something you have created and play it back in an awesome way. Someone that's taken the time to learn that, every little note, every little nuance, and nail it. That's honestly for me, probably the most gratifying thing as a musician that you can witness.
Yeah, I could agree with that. It's always nice to see someone put in the time and then really crush it. And, I like when I see people that you can tell they know they know the technical aspect of whatever it is, but then they add their own twist to it. That's always really nice too. But from a teaching perspective, my favorite thing is being able to work with students who are actually excited and motivated and really take it seriously. That's when that student is going to get my best teaching, Right. Because I know that they're serious about it. I can really put a ton of passion into it. And I know it's just not going to go like in one ear, not the other. And it's just all about like, having this like sit down and, I took a lesson with Matt, or I took a lesson with Mike, or Jordan for that matter. It's really like, yeah, you're a great teacher, but I want to learn this, and I'm really amped about learning this. Like that's always the most fun, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, otherwise it becomes routine.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's if we thrived on routine, then we'd be in a routine. I think part of going back to the thrill and the risk of what all three of us are doing is that there is no routine, and and I honestly think kind of spiritually, I wouldn't consider myself the most spiritual person, but I mean, maybe you guys could agree, but since breaking a routine, be it school or university or a regular kind of 9 to 5, I feel like because the accumulation of memories are so varied, I feel like I have lived longer. That sounds really bizarre, but do you relate to this at all? Like I'm thinking about, say, a tour I did or a trip I did, and I'm thinking, wow, was that only 2 years ago? It seems like it was like 10 years ago. So I honestly think that breaking a routine is the key to at least spiritually longer existence on Earth. Maybe that sounds crazy, but I don't know. That's kind of the way I like to think of things, I guess.
That totally makes sense. That was actually a really cool way to describe that kind of thing, because I do think back and I think about all these experiences and I can't believe how recent some of the experiences were, because it feels like it was so long ago. And it is because there's no real routine, and you live for the experiences rather than, for the weekend, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's how we like to do things, I think. However, obviously there are, I don't want either of us to sort of sit here and be like, everyone should do this because it's the tits. So many people thrive off that security, and living for the weekend is totally fine. I just think for myself personally, I prefer to do more variation, but I don't in any way want anyone listening to think that like any of us are kind of, I was just speaking for myself here. I don't want anyone to think that I'm preaching like being a life coach or anything and saying you should all do this because you'll be happier. Everyone is different, and I think people can use that to fuel their own creativity and whatever it is that they're doing. Everyone can tailor make their lifestyle to suit their own happiness and their own goals. And it's really motivating. It's really motivating talking about this stuff. I feel super motivated, guys. Great job.
You're doing all the motivating for yourself. It seems like that's awesome. Well, okay. So within that though, there has to be some sort of routine, I would imagine, that you stick to. Being in a different place all the time, having a different schedule, being with different people. Are there any things that you do on a daily basis that are ritualistic in that sense? Like, I know Jordan has a morning routine. I sort of do. There's just certain things every day that you need, and maybe the answer is just it's travel for you in and of itself. Like, that is fulfilling and you don't really need that. But are there any specific rituals or things that you take advantage of each day?
I'm really trying to think, honestly. I don't really have any regularity, any consistency. I'm really trying to think, because also you throw in time zones into the equation, and also what you have to achieve in a specific moment. Be it, say, right now I'm working on this label and this release, and at the same time I've got to write 3 DVDs worth of content for this tuition thing that I'm working on. At the same time, I'm on the road, so I'm sat in a house in Charleston, West Virginia right now. I was just on tour. I'm going to Sicily in a few days, and then immediately coming back to the States to do another tour. There's no routine there at all. But I would really like to have a routine of just physical or spiritual exercise, and that's something that I really want to get into, because this year especially, maybe it's being 27 or whatever. I mean, I try and look after myself on the road. I don't eat, crap, but I do feel run down, and I suffer from migraines occasionally, but quite rarely. But the more I'm out of a routine of sleep and eat, so sleep and food, if I spend 3 days or 4 days being inconsistent with that, I'll get hit with a migraine. And so there is an amount of sort of physical well-being that I want to try and take care of. And actually, I know this is something that you, Matt, have been getting into. We spoke about this in London, and Jeff Holcomb was doing the same thing, getting into this kind of routine of just 45 minutes of exercise. And I could just see how happy and fulfilled it kind of made everyone.
And, it's funny, at the very least, I'll do 10 minutes of exercise a day. And that seems to be enough for me to feel stabilized in that way. And it keeps you feeling good, and it keeps you from getting sick, especially if you're going to sweat it out. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And I remember that conversation, and, it's so easy if you think about it to be able to stay fit in that way. And the physical fitness helps you stay mentally fit. I mean, it's such a connected kind of thing, and for me, it keeps me sane. So, even if it is 5 minutes a day, to do something like that will really help you. And it's funny, Mark Holcomb and Jeff Holcomb both have been more consistent about it lately. And I've gotten some text messages from Mark and from Jeff that are just, basically saying like, this is awesome. I do feel better. I have more energy. And maybe for you, eating well and doing your best to listen to your body's needs for sleep, maybe that is the ritual, because the time zones are always changing, because you're always in a different place. Maybe that is it. And that's okay. I mean, it can be simple like that,
Actually, one thing that I do terribly is sleep. I'm really bad at sleeping. And this is something that has always been the case for me. These past 2 weeks, I was going from 2 hours a night to 4 hours a night. The maximum was 5 hours a night sleep.
But is that okay? Just not to interrupt you, but is that you tossing and turning in bed, or is that you sort of like the fear of missing out factor? Because I know you,
right?
I know that if there's a chance for you to just go to bed or go out and have an awesome experience or have a meal or jump out of a plane or whatever it is, like similar to, again, we're bringing up Mark Holcomb. I know Mark very rarely will choose sleep over a chance to do something that could be really fun, and he doesn't want to miss out. So which is it for you?
It is absolutely both. It's fear of missing out 100% until I get to the point where my body is so physically drained, I try and sleep and then I can't. It's that when that happens, it's sort of insomnia based on the fact that I am taking on a lot of responsibility in my own career and professional and personal life. This is something that I think is a side effect a lot of people will feel when they take on any kind of self-employed venture, is the worry factor. And I have a very hyperactive mind. I actually wrote a tune literally about this for the record. It's tough. I have to be, I think maybe on some psychological level, I go out a lot and do stupid things just so I can have a peaceful night's sleep, because my body is so drained I can't even summon the energy to worry. Does that sound really sad?
No, that makes sense to me.
It's in terms of, I've always been a very bad sleeper, but funnily enough, I think something that hasn't helped, something that you might find interesting, is until March this year, I'd never had a cup of coffee in my life. And I was introduced to coffee in Las Vegas by my friend from Finland, who makes amazing coffee. And now that's kind of been fueling, this tour especially. I just did Summer NAMM, and obviously anyone that's been to a NAMM show or knows what the NAMM show is will know that there's very little opportunity for sleep there if you're doing it right. And coffee's kind of been the fuel that's kept me going. So, maybe I'm on course for some kind of physical and mental breakdown, which I think is one of the reasons why I'm really interested in the stuff that we were talking about in London, just even the 10 minutes a day of just not even focusing on the physical well-being, but taking time to do something that makes you feel better, as just feel happier and get the blood flowing,
Man, Mike, I thought all of your accomplishments were so impressive, but the fact that you avoided coffee until you're 27, that's like next level.
It's crazy. I'm from the land of tea, but at the same time, that is really weird. People in England do drink coffee. It's just, I don't know, man. I just didn't like the smell when I was a kid or something. But I now at this stage, because I think last year what happened is I was doing these tours with, so there's a band called the Moody Blues, who are like this kind of legendary old rock band from like the 60s, and I do shows sort of opening for and playing with the frontman. And on those tours, I found myself being so tired that I would neck a couple of Red Bulls before going on stage. And actually, Chris Trapea, who I know you know, Matt, he used to tech for you guys. He's the tech on that tour. And he noticed from the side of the stage that when I was between songs, my hand was just like twitching and slapping my leg, like completely subconsciously. And he was like, dude, that's really not good. And I think if I do need a caffeine injection, I would rather it be from coffee than from Red Bull. And I think that's where the decision kind of came from. Is that weird?
No, I can relate to that. I don't really mess with any of the energy drinks.
Yeah,
I stick to coffee if I need my caffeine, or I stick to tea because tea has quite a bit of caffeine as well. Yeah, you get to work and tour with T-Rope, who is a great dude. But
so not to interrupt you, Matt, but like we met in Montreal. That was where I met that dude because he was teching for you at that show.
That's right.
It's crazy how this stuff works, man. Now we're like sharing crew.
So for anyone listening, Chris Tropea, or T-Rope, which is his nickname, he's a great friend. He's a great dude. He used to tour with the Dillinger Escape Plan and ended up working with Periphery, ended up working with you, Mike, and the Moody Blues. He worked for Prince. He's had like quite a badass teching career. And maybe if we ever can, we'll get Chris on the podcast and he and I can tell our story.
Oh, that would be fun. That guy has some stories. I mean, the stories he has about Prince. I mean, he always leads with, I think he always says when people ask him how working with Prince was, he just says, Prince made me a grilled cheese once, which I think is just so T-Rope.
It really is very T-Rope.
This actually ties into something that might be quite interesting for the listeners who are interested in getting into the music industry specifically. Isn't it interesting how I don't think any one of us, T-Rope, myself, or you guys, have ever really achieved anything by showing your resume. You know what I mean? In the sense that, T-Rope's out teching with myself and the Moody Blues and Justin because he's great. I mean, he does a great job, but he's a great guy and he's a great hang. And I mean, I'm here doing this podcast with you guys because I shot Matt a message and we were like, yeah, because we know each other and we kind of hang, And I think that's something that if people aren't really aware of how important the social aspect of the music business is, that's something that people really need to take on, because pretty much everything that I've ever done has been from, in fact, there's actually a musician who I won't name because it's not announced yet, but he's from another country that isn't the UK or the US. We met at NAMM. We had a good time, and he just invited me to his country to do some shows. That's kind of how things are done, right? Does that relate to you, Matt? I know you're in a different sort of side to the industry, and there's a lot more of an infrastructure and agents getting stuff. But do you make a lot of decisions that are actively involved in just getting together with people that have a good vibe and you click with?
Definitely. For me, it's a little bit more like I'm more inclined to spend my time with people that I naturally engage with rather than, I don't want to say forcing it, but like, kind of reaching for it, if that makes sense. I don't even know how to say it the best way, but for me, okay, so when I look at myself as a drummer and I look at like what I do when I travel around and I do clinics and stuff like that, and I am by myself, I find myself in these situations where I really do have to be very outwardly social with everyone, because I don't have other team members who may be better with certain personality types or may, kind of jive with people on different levels than I do. I have to kind of look for those things and listen when having conversations and find the connecting points. And a lot of that just is, if you're talking specifically, it's like when you meet someone, don't talk about yourself. Ask questions, learn about them, learn about their interests, see what things you can connect on, and put yourself out there in that way. But from a band perspective, there's guys in my band that all of us rely on to like go be the social messenger. Oh, right. We're tired. We're gonna go to bed. But hey, Mark, you're going out. Awesome. Go make friends for the band. And
that's a luxury I wish I had, dude. That's amazing.
Totally. And I guess to your point, which is a big point. Yes, being a great hang and being appropriate and knowing your role and knowing where you fall in any situation, sort of whether it's the pecking order or whether it's just kind of not being the guy who wants all the attention in the room, but like observing the room and paying attention to your environment, that's really important for anyone. And then you can kind of figure out how to fit into whatever conversation or whatever social scenario is taking place. But at the same time, I know quite a few people that you know as well, who are more stoic, for lack of better wording, who aren't necessarily as social maybe as you are, or me or Jordan or Mark, for example, but they still get tons of gigs. And I think with those people, and if you're listening to this, if you don't really think that you are that social of a person and that is really hard for you, you don't have to be drastically over social. You just kind of have to be really nice and really receptive and understand the environment, and then do your job really well without complaining.
Sure.
And I think that's the key, is to not draw negative attention to yourself, but to simply just be the person that no one really needs to worry about. So when it comes time to book a tour and they say, oh, you know what, that guitar tech we need, yeah, he's great. I never even noticed he's around. He just does his job and crushes it. So yeah, let's get him out, because that's a no-brainer. That's nothing to worry about. That's the other side of it. Like, you don't have to be overly social, but you have to do your job well, and you have to be able to just kind of be a chameleon or a fly on the wall sometimes, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no... I mean, the most important thing is always going to be, do you do a great job? You know what I mean? Like that's why you're there, obviously. And yeah, I totally relate to the, you don't want to force yourself to be an extrovert all the time. Yeah. I think being honest is very valuable. I guess what I was trying to say is, no one likes the guy at the party or event who's going around saying, hey, here's my card. This is what I do. You know what I mean? It's,
you can smell the bullshit on them, and there's an ulterior motive.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not honest. Like, if you're coming to talk to, if someone's coming to talk to you and they are just trying to sell themselves, that's not an engagement. That's them. That's a pitch. It's not genuine. That's the thing. So honesty is so important in this industry, I think. I value it incredibly highly. And also people that, if you have a freelance task, for example, and you want to try and hire someone to do that, be it some graphic work or some editing work, and they say to you, honestly, I've never done that before, but I'll give it a go. I appreciate that more than the bullshit of, oh yeah, no problem. Really, honesty is it goes a long way, for sure.
My North Star in business and career is asking myself, am I adding value? And if not, how can I add value? I don't think you can ask for anything or try to sell anything until you've established that. For those who have been paying attention to this podcast for almost 4 months now, it took us maybe 2 months of us adding value by sharing this content for us to make one ask. And the ask was, hey, would you mind, if you feel like we've added value to your life, would you mind going to the iTunes and leaving a review or a rating? And I think our listeners, whether it's like overt or not, I think they can at least taste that or smell that, in that we're not asking of anything from them. This whole project has been, how do we add value to the community? And part of that is with the Facebook group, asking them directly, to your point, having clear communication, and figuring out, okay, well, maybe they want this, but we're not the best people for that. Or maybe they're asking for something different, and maybe we can consider, offering that.
Absolutely. Sorry, guys. I just needed to reset my Logic session expired for my backup.
Oh, we're all good, man. We're all just figuring this shit out together, man.
Yeah, man. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to go again. Would you just repeat the last 10 seconds of what you just said, Jordan, just so I can...
So the idea is that it's about adding value. And before we even ask for anything, so with this podcast, it's been about, how do we add value to a potential listener? And then once we get some listeners, we're having clear and direct communication with them to see what's working and what's not before we've ever asked for anything. We've never, asked anyone to purchase anything from this. And
Sure.
Up until this point, 4 months in, the biggest ask we've had is, would you consider leaving a review on iTunes?
Sure.
I found for me, the most success I have had is when I am contributing to some sort of community. So for instance, I teach a lot of young musicians and they ask, well, how do I get from the point of being in a band to then playing shows? And I say, you know what? Go join music community. And if not, go form music community, because friends help friends at the end of the day.
Exactly. Friends help friends, right? Exactly. No one wants to. Yeah, that's the thing. You make genuine connections with people, and it's human nature, isn't it? You want to help out your friends, and it's not done in any kind of way that's expecting anything in return necessarily. It's not a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's just being a decent human being.
I think that's key. That's the key point is do things without expectation of something coming back to you. And I get joy out of doing that. Like if I meet somebody and I can put them in touch with somebody else or point them in a direction for whatever it is, it's awesome to do that because it's like, hell yeah, I helped somebody potentially today. And if it turns into something, then it's great because you feel like you did something good,
Exactly. And that ties into this podcast as well, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting a lot out of this just being motivated by this conversation. This is something that we would do with a beer anyway.
Totally. I agree. And okay, so speaking of the big picture conversation, I have two things that I wanted to ask. One of these questions ties back to one of our listeners, who's a great drummer named Adam Yanzi. And he posted in the group, I think earlier this week or last week, and he was talking about how he's been grinding his ass off lately. And this goes back to what you were saying before, Mike, but I want to touch on a little bit more in depth. He was talking about how lately he's been grinding his ass off and he knows that he needs to give himself a break and needs to, reward himself, almost with like just one day off to do whatever he wants to do. And within the time that he gave himself to have a break, he felt extremely kind of, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like conflicted about it because he knew that he took the time off to relax, but all he wanted to do was work. That's all that. And you were talking about having trouble sleeping, and I imagine it's because your mind is racing at night sometimes, and you're thinking about all the things you need to do. We were talking about, you were saying like it's okay to give yourself a break and work all the time, but give yourself a break. How do you give yourself a break when your mind is racing? Like how? Like, do you see what I'm asking? And
absolutely, I 100%. I've had this debate internally and with a few other people. In fact, I think I was talking to Misha about this not too long ago. So there's a few things that I do. So when it comes to really needing a break, first of all, I get bored very easily. I find that a good thing for me is to say, put down the guitar, put down the computer, put down the Mike Dawes in parenthesis world, and do something else like watch a movie, play a video game, go hang out with friends for as long as it takes until I am so sick of doing that all I want to do is play guitar and do my stuff, right? And that for me is my rest. My rest is distracting myself until I'm physically incapable of not picking up my guitar again. Because at the end of the day, what I'm doing, and I'm sure what Adam's doing as well, is out of passion. Like having a break is great, but we're gonna want to come back to it. Like he wants to play the drums, right? He wants to do his thing. So there is that. In terms of taking a break and having a distraction, I'll veg out on the sofa, watch a couple of movies, and then at the end of that, I'll just be so bored of that, I will want to be productive physically, and I'll be physically rested by that point. Another thing is switch off your goddamn phones. Everyone who is listening to this, right now, the best ideas creatively for work and for just general life, just spiritual decisions come from when I'm like in the shower or driving, or sometime when I'm just in my head and I'm not staring at my device, my computer, my phone, whatever, iPad, whatever. When I'm 27, so I grew up, when I was at school, we didn't really have mobile phones, or they started to come in, like the Nokia 3310 and stuff came in when I was at school. But I'd be at the bus stop. And when I was at the bus stop, I'd be at the bus stop with all the other people on their way to work, on their way to school, and we just wait for the bus, right? Now you don't wait for the bus. You're on Facebook. You don't ride the bus. You're on Facebook. You know what I mean? When I was at that bus stop waiting for the bus, all my creative ideas and my inspirations came to me. You cannot get that motivation if you're fiddling and procrastinating on your phones. Do you agree with that?
It's cool you mentioned that, because in the past week or so, I've actually been experimenting with that, and I'll often go get dinner where my apartment is. There's a bunch of restaurants within walking distance, and I will now leave my phone at the apartment and I will be without it for, an hour, for 2 hours or so. It is one of the most liberating decisions that I've made recently. There's just something, there's less attachment, there's less weight, there's less stress, and there's more freedom to explore myself.
Exactly. That last statement, man. Like, absolutely. It's, if you are looking at something, you are not in your own mind creating thoughts, having ideas. You know what I mean? We're all creatives in some capacity, and to have that creative potential fulfilled, we need to have ideas. And you can't have ideas if the part of your brain that creates ideas is distracted by anything else. So going back to Matt's point about how you can not feel guilty about resting, is honestly, if you're resting physically, but your mind is also well rested, you will come up with ideas almost involuntarily. It will happen. It's called inspiration. You know what I mean? You don't look for inspiration. It just happens, and it happens through rest and through switching off.
I think maybe a way to reframe it is treat it as time to invest in yourself for your larger goals.
Absolutely. Yeah. The last sentence you said of your previous point hit the nail on the head. Freedom to explore yourself, basically.
So, Mike, I want to go back a bit when you were talking about the cottage clinics. And if you want to sit back, in pro wrestling terms, I want to put you over for a bit. All right. So I was checking out your website this morning, as I said earlier. And one, I was so impressed with the service of the cottage clinic, and to give a snapshot. So you're asking people to really not do much except show up either to an airport or one of two train stations, right? At 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And you're there to pick them up, and you'll take them, I guess, to the cottage and do some guitar instruction. And then you guys will go out and eat and drink, and then come back and do more guitar, all in time to be dropped off at the same location at a specific time.
Yeah.
So
that's it in a nutshell.
One, I love the simplicity of the service. I love just how effortless it is to think, okay, all I need to do is show up at this very, public place at 10 a.m. and the rest will be taken care of. But really, what I want to compliment you on, and I think a lot of people can learn from it, is that I read this before I had ever spoken to you, and I really read it before I watched any video of you. But just through your written copy, I got a very clear sense of your personality and what it would be like to have that experience with you.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I haven't even read that page on the website for quite some time, so I can't recall exactly what it says. But yeah, I mean, that's something that I do. I mean, it's always online, and I'll get inquiries for it, and I'll, if it works timing wise, it works. If I'm away on tour and it doesn't work, it doesn't. But I normally do maybe, let's say, 10 of those in a year, given my schedule, like a full day, people coming. But people come from all over the world. In fact, the last one I just did, a dude came from Australia, if you can believe that.
That's incredible.
Australia, UK. I mean, he had a few other lessons with a few other people around the same time, but we did 2 of these whole days. We did a Friday and then he would spend the weekend practicing what we did, and then we do a whole Monday as well, right? And most people actually come from France or Belgium or sort of Western Europe, but outside of the UK. That seems to be pretty common. People doing that, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, and also it's in the countryside. You know what I mean? I take them for lunch at this award-winning country pub with all the British cliches. You know, your cider, your ales, your all that stuff, and it's a good time. And I guess I'm hoping that I'm coming across in a genuine way on here, because I'm very, very honest at any teaching situation. Like, if I want to trash on a record label, I'll trash on a record label. And that's really not a professional thing to do. But I think I've developed a little bit of a reputation for that within the community. And I think that's what people appreciate. You know, I'll tell people stories about how I was totally miserable and just an embarrassing shell of a human being, you know, because it will help them, or I feel it will help them in their development. And again, helping people and watching them grow in the same way that you're watching them cover a technical piece of music that you've composed in a brilliantly proficient way is the most rewarding thing about this whole journey.
Yeah, it really seems like you've curated a very authentic experience, not only with you, but in this romantic sense of your town. And as you spoke earlier in the podcast about, you are part of a very niche community with a fingerstyle type of guitar playing. But in that sense, it's almost an advantage to you in that it's this idea of depth over width. So yeah, it may be a very narrow field that you're in, but you've gone really deep into it. And for those people who may be as far away as Australia, if they really connect with what you do, then they're willing to invest time and money, in this type of experience.
That's the thing. It is a niche, and actually I got some advice pretty early on when I was at school from a friend's dad named Bibbs Eckel, and he is a balalaika player. This is a Russian family who play the Russian traditional instrument, the balalaika, which is sort of like it's like a 3-string almost ukulele, but with a triangular body. It looks like a nacho with a couple of strings on it. It's bizarre, but it's because it's such a niche thing. He gets all the gigs, right? He does the movie soundtracks for the gangster movies, you know, like Snatch and Lock, Stock and whatever. He plays, that's his thing. And he's the guy that gets flown in to do it because he's the best at that. And also there's just not that many other people doing it. The scene that I'm in it's small, but it is growing for sure. I mean, in the UK, we had this big pop star named Newton Faulkner, who's a good friend now, actually. In 2008, 2009, he had a few number one albums in the UK, you know, and he's a singer-songwriter, but he plays sort of percussive modern fingerstyle guitar, and that was his kind of thing. So it is growing for sure. It's a growing scene. I'm very grateful to be included with this list of my own personal guitar heroes, because I am the youngling really in the scene. Most of these guys are in their 40s or older, you know, and they've been doing it since sort of the 80s, some of them or even earlier. So yeah, I think having a niche is a very powerful thing if you invest yourself fully into it, you know. I mean, like Matt, you know, that whole scene, again, I'm looking at it from the outside. I mean, both you guys probably know more about it than I do, but you know, both you guys are trailblazers, right? I mean, you're the dudes that the other kids want to learn from to do that specific, in the grand scheme of things, niche thing.
Honestly, I'm completely ignorant to Matt's world. I guess in the same way that I'm ignorant to your world, but I also play in a very specific field.
Right.
And I think a really nice lesson in this part of the conversation is that, you know, as social creatures, we all have this innate desire to fit in. Or if we're just more realistically trying to make money and support ourselves, we look to what everyone else is doing and what seems to work. But if we really can find that thing that feels more true or authentic to us, and maybe it's something that we've been doing all our lives anyway and develop some sort of passion or skill, if we really believe in that and really go all into that, and in a way, find a way to add value to someone else with that passion or skill, I think the world comes to you. Now, granted, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and you've demonstrated this really well. You've taken all this attention that you got from the Gautier cover, and you're writing for different music publications, and you've leveraged social media and even creating apps and all these different things. So it does take these skills to kind of leverage the attention and be able to communicate with the world what you're doing. But I think the fact that I guess what all three of us have is very specific. It makes it much easier to stand out if, we're putting the work in and really learning the craft.
That's the thing. I mean, I was the university course, so I guess the equivalent in the US would be college. The course that I guess majored in was sort of it was called commercial music. Literally, it was sort of music twinned with business, but it was pop music. I was the black sheep of that whole thing. Why don't you get a singer? Why don't you try and write a hit? And I was fully invested in my niche. I think the other guy that came out of that course was doing pretty super well right now. In my year is the MD and keyboard player for Rag and Bone Man now, and Rag and Bone Man's blown up big time this year actually. I completely blanked on what I was just about to say. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the
So
the
I
last
actually
thing you just
relate
said?
to your story at university when I have a master's in clinical psychology, and
Right.
everything that I did in those classes was incorporating drumming and rhythm more specifically. And so in that sense, I was the black sheep of the program, and everyone was supportive, but they were definitely questioning my path and curious about how I could monetize this. But
Right.
for me, through just playing in bands, I learned how to, build and market brands, and I trusted in the work. And now multiple times a semester, I get asked to come back and speak to the current grad students in a sense of they want to use me as a model of how I use that educational program to launch a career. I think it's playing at the edge. I mean, that's where new things are invented and created, and that's where you stand out. But it's this idea of you got to go to the edges.
Exactly. But from the outside, it's very easy to dismiss it as, oh, he's doing something niche, therefore, of course he's known for it. Of course, it's easy. That's really not the case. You're grinding as much as anybody else, really. And also, the disadvantage of being in a niche is the ceiling. If I'm sure any of us had put the effort that we have put into what it is that we're doing, because we're passionate about it, if we'd put that effort into a different side of the industry, we may well be in a situation where we're at the same level of stability right now, but the ceiling is a lot higher. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm never going to be playing Wembley Stadium as a solo fingerstyle guitar player.
Honestly, don't think that, Mike.
No, yeah, but I mean, it's a niche at the end of the day. You know what I mean? I'm playing very unusual music because it's what makes me happy. I'm not doing it with any commerciality in mind at all. None. There's the musical side of things is completely all about whatever I happen to want to write at the time. This next album era, there's maybe like one tune on it that your casual listener would pick up on. The rest of it's just deep, just whatever just came out. But then having the business mindset to think, how can we maximize on this? That's what's very interesting. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you guys when you're creating, do you create with that kind of commerciality in mind, or is I don't really know where you guys would come from on that.
Again, my North Star is, am I adding value? How can I add value? And then even more specifically, how can I communicate that value to a potential consumer?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with both of you guys in this sense. for me, it's the things that I end up creating are based off of my natural interests and things that excite me and things that I end up wanting to genuinely share with people because I am excited about it and I like to talk about and do the things that I'm into. So it's really genuine from that standpoint, but it's never like, let's build something that's going to reach a lot of people. Okay, what do we build? I'm really into this, and man, this could probably affect or help a lot of people if they know that I'm into this, even if they don't pay attention to it from my standpoint, but maybe they'll pay attention to it in their own way, and that's fine too. You know, like, it's funny, it makes me think of the band happy thing when I had that going on. You know, I wanted people to use the platform to teach and to engage with their fans, but I was just as happy hearing about people that, you know, like musicians that I was friends with who would come up to me and say, yeah, like, no offense, but I don't really need the platform because I'm already doing this myself. And to me, that's great. Like, whether I inspired that person to teach or not, it's a shared interest and it's something that's going to help people and benefit more people than if I was the only one just doing it, if that makes sense, which kind of ties into this idea of like, be happy for those around you that are either in your field or outside of your field that are doing great things. Don't be jealous. Don't be spiteful or like say, oh, I wish that was me, or they're having more success or things like that.
I mean, man, that's such an important point. And that's another thing that I've actually been very aware of scrolling through platforms like Instagram, where every Instagram video you see is some hot young shredder just killing it. And it's so easy just to think, oh man, they're like 13 years old and there's no way I'll ever reach that level. And I'm 27, you know what I mean? But really, you can just switching that mindset, because I used to look at other players with a little bit of like suspicion, you know, how can I do that? Blah, blah. I am a much happier person now that I've just stopped giving a fuck, basically, about all of that stuff. I think someone just gave me that advice once, just stop giving a fuck. And really, I'm so much happier because of that. And also, a lot of the music that I digest myself as a fan comes from friends, which is kind of strange. Like it's almost like if I know the person is a good person, I enjoy every bit of creativity that they put out there because I know where it comes from.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny. We've actually talked about that on previous episodes where, you know, you may not love the style, but because you like the people behind it, you can become a fan in that way. And then you end up actually liking it a lot more. But I think the key to what you're saying is, you know, one, lighten up a little bit. Like don't take yourself so seriously and don't take others so seriously. And look at the big picture. If there's a young player that's out there that's crushing it, but they're making more people aware of the genre and the style, then that is a good thing ultimately, because it allows people to get hooked on this big picture idea and then dig in on their own time to find all the different contributors that sort of fill up that genre or that topic or whatever it may be, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
So, and that's the other way to look at it. It's just like, yeah, chill out a little bit and like, don't worry so much about what other people are doing. But if you're going to be on Instagram, you're going to look at other people. You have to shift the mindset to say, wow, this is a really good thing that people are pushing in this field, you know, and they're making other people aware.
And also how can I learn from that? How can I improve what I'm doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just it's very important to realize that you can always do it better. And there's tons of inspiration out there and tons of influence out there if you look for it and you look at things that way. Like you could look at someone's channel on Instagram that's getting tons and tons of followers and say, okay, what things can I take from this that aren't necessarily the unique magic that this one person has, but what things can I do? Like, is there good video? Can I film with the same quality of video? Is there really good audio? Can I film or can I record with the same kind of audio? Those things are really important from the, you know, with the point that you mentioned. But the key is to not like let it bum you out if you don't have what they have. You can only control so much and you only have your experiences to work from and your ability to work from. So do the best you can is I think, you know, the key to that.
Absolutely.
So we should wrap up soon, but one thing just a general thing that I wanted to ask you about, and maybe we've touched on this, but is there something that stands out to you in your career thus far as either a one-time thing or a consistent thing that you seem to struggle with, or that you keep encountering as a challenge that you continuously have to overcome? Is there something that is even maybe universal that you're like, oh, there's that thing again? You know, like for me, it's anxiety. You know, like I always have some level of anxiety with all sorts of different things for different reasons in my life. And it's just something I have to temper and accept and know how to handle. Is there anything like that you tend to struggle with? Absolutely. 100%. The idea of you haven't done enough, right? Going back to what you were saying about the drummer feeling this anxiety when he's resting, you know, feeling that he's wasting time. That is honestly a big thing about what I do. This year I've made efforts to take breaks more. Like I said, it was a bit of a New Year's resolution, and be it watching movies or seeing friends. In fact, I've been taking a lot of recreational trips this year. I went to Budapest and to Finland for midsummer, and I'm going to Sicily next week. And these are all recreational trips just to spend time with good people. But every day there's the "did I do enough?" voice, you know, because there is no one else to say yes or no. It is just my own imagination. So then how do you say yes or no? What's the measurement tool? That is the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, yeah. Look, I guess it is what keeps pushing you. I'm trying to think, honestly. I mean, when you're on tour, it's pretty easy because, you know, did I do a good show? You know, I can let the emails stack up when I'm on tour, and I can not feel bad about it because I'm on tour. You know what I mean? When it's a weekend, anywhere in the world, it's okay, because the rest of the world, even though you're working, the rest of the world typically isn't. So I use that as a breathing period, trying to sink in with the rest of the world. It's all very well not having a routine and doing whatever you want whenever you want, but the downside of that is that there's no one to say stop. It's okay to stop. For me, the weekends, especially Sundays, if I'm not on tour, I will use as an excuse to rest and to recuperate and try and treat the Sundays as, you know, my dad would, for example. I mean, the whole "it's never good enough, you've never done enough" is something that all creatives have, really. I'm sure you can both relate to this. For me, emptying an inbox helps. Making a list is something recently, not all the time, but only recently I've started doing, helps. And also setting short but achievable deadlines. Like, that is probably the biggest help, because that's the equivalent of doing a 9 to 5 for us, really. It's, you know, doing this by this time, go home and have fun. You know, so I'll set myself short, achievable deadlines. So for me, today I had a series of video edits to do. Actually, the designer for my album, who's doing the artwork, he lost his hard drive on a flight to Miami, so I have to kind of solve that issue, like redo all that stuff. I've got 23 more emails in my inbox I want to clear out, and I'm going to do my post NAMM show, connecting with everyone who I got a card from and things like this, and just saying thank you to everyone that came out to a show on this tour. Once I've done that, over the next few hours, then I'll chill and have fun with these friends who I'm with. Tomorrow I'm flying. Normally when I'm flying, I'll do a little bit of work on the plane, be it through a list form or maybe a few interviews or something like that. There's no one solution, unfortunately, because it's always a variety of problems, isn't it? There's always something else coming in, and it could be something creative. It could have a creative solution, or it could have an academic solution. But time management and small achievable deadlines has definitely helped me. I couldn't agree more. I always say it's about what priorities are pressing and what things you need to do first. And that kind of helps you to place things that can be pushed a little bit further out aside. And then you take those priorities and you make them into small, measurable deadlines, essentially. And then it sounds like what you do and what I try to do is reward myself, even if it's a small reward, like taking the night off and playing, N64, that's a kind of reward to let your mind rest and let yourself breathe a bit.
Exactly. Playing a game and chilling out is not being unproductive. It is being productive because you're resetting yourself for whatever it is that you're going to do next. I mean, I look at you guys in your circle. A lot of you guys are hardcore gamers. And a few years ago, I was thinking, how are these guys being so productive, but still managing to complete an RPG? And it's all down to time management, and that time management benefiting yourself moving forward.
Totally. Yeah, you have to. I mean, look, no human being can be on 24/7 all the time. There has to be some recharging point. And I think this again addresses some questions that we've seen in the group. But, instead of taking one full week off necessarily to give yourself a vacation, give yourself some vacation time every single day as part of a reward for reaching those daily goals. And if you can keep track of your time and set those goals based off of the priorities, then you genuinely will feel good and productive, and you'll feel okay with giving yourself that reward time.
Absolutely. And this also relates directly to composition as well. You can't grind a composition, like going away from the business thing and going into the creative thing. Even going all the way back to the whole somebody that I used to know thing, I grinded for 4 days and then I just went away to Paris with a friend for the weekend, came back and grinded for 4 days. If I hadn't had that break in the middle, it would have not been a labor of love. It would have just been labor, Taking breaks is really, really important with the creative side as well as the business side. You
can't force it, right?
Exactly.
For the band, like for Periphery, I've noticed. So after we put out P3, everybody in the band was just kind of like, cool, I'm not writing for a while. I'm not even going to pick up a guitar or pick up the drums or whatever from that standpoint with that focus. And I think that that's a good example of that. Like, you just can't force it and force it and force it. And just to reinforce that further, eventually sometime soon, we're going to get back in the writing saddle, all of us, and it'll be time to write a new record. And I know for us as a band, and I'm sure this is the same for you, and you even talked about this before, you wouldn't even go and take these tour offers until you gave yourself a full year to have material to promote. Well, it's the same thing for us. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter whether it's super inspired and we write a record in 1 month, or it takes us a long time and we write it in 6 months. When we give ourselves the chance to be creative, we truly give ourselves the chance to be creative, and we don't force it. And I think that is a huge key there. You know what I mean? You have to give yourself a break. And I learned about this. I talk about this when I teach, and I learned it from different people in my life. But and going back to video games, here's the perfect example. And I've talked about this in different on different platforms before. But you play the video game and you get to a level and you get to this boss and you want to beat the boss and you can't beat the boss and you try and you force it and you force it and you just keep failing and failing and you throw the controllers down and you're all pissed off and upset, and then you go do something else completely because you can't take it anymore. And then for whatever reason, you come back a couple hours later or the next day and you try once or twice and you got it. You just, you did it. You beat the level, and you achieved the goal. So
nailed it.
Part of that comes from this. There's I'm sure there's multiple studies on this, but one that I'm very familiar with is the Pomodoro method, which basically, it's based on a specific amount of time, and I won't get too granular with it, but it's really important for humans to give themselves breaks so that their mind and their body can catch up to each other and actually be ready to take on new creativity or new challenges.
Oh man, or just retain new information. This is hitting the nail on the head with a practice routine. Even it's all about working, taking a break, and you sort of increase your ability like a step pattern. when you're taking a break, you don't sink too much. You kind of plateau. And then the next time you practice, you go up another level. And then you rest and you go up another level. If you're grinding all the time, you're ascending this sort of diagonal line going from the bottom left to the top right. The second you take a break after like a 9-hour slog, you're going to sink right back down to near where you started. Your mind and your body need rest to retain information and to progress.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I think that's a really good point for us to kind of wrap this up on. But before we do, I wanted to ask Mike if now's a great chance for you to plug your new record, any shows that you have coming up, and then also any socials that you want to push so that people can, people who specifically don't know you can follow you, can check out what you're doing, and actually connect the dots. So is there anything that you want to push while we have you here?
Nice, man. Yeah, I mean, when's the estimated time of airing?
We're going to put this out next week. So the week. Okay. Yeah, the week. It'll be this coming Monday, which I think today's the 18th, nice. Right? So the 24th, I think.
Well, in that case, yeah. I mean, basically, my name's Mike Dawes. No, I have a new, my second record, Era, is coming out September the 15th worldwide on my own label. And I'm actually going to be on tour on the East Coast and Center. So I'm doing New York at the Iridium, Manhattan, August 14th. 15th is Jam in Java in Vienna, Virginia. Then a little guitar festival down in Wisconsin. And then I'm doing a UK tour, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and more UK after that for the rest of the year before resting in December in a puddle of exhaustion, but hopefully progressive and enthused in exhaustion.
That's awesome. And where can people find you online?
MikeDawes.com, DAWES, Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff. Easy.
Okay. And like even on Instagram and YouTube, is it just Mike Dawes, or is there a specific handle that you use?
Yeah, sorry that I did a whole other track on Logic and now I'm just setting up another one.
Oh, that's okay. No worries.
Bear with me 1 second, sorry. So there's these two little edit points we have, but it's no big deal.
It's all good. Our listeners are very kind to us and they understand. So it's
okay.
It's all
nice
good.
One. I'm adding another track right now. Input. You can tell how often I use Logic.
That's okay.
Here we go. And let's see. Oh, my startup disk is full. That's fantastic. That's okay. We're rolling. So yeah, I'm MikeDawes.com, Mike Dawes Official on Facebook and YouTube, Mike Dawes Music on Twitter, and just Mike_Dawes on Instagram. And but I mean, I could just yell loudly from where I am, and hopefully I'll yell loud enough to reach you. I don't know.
That works. Yeah, and we'll add all the handles and so forth and the tags to the Facebook group for the podcast, as well as the podcast website as well.
Oh, and by the way, this new record, it features that Periphery cover I did. It's on it.
Scarlet.
The new mix, yeah. So that'll be formally released finally on record September the 15th. So hopefully you guys will dig that.
That's awesome. I'm stoked. I mean, I love watching you perform that, and I've obviously watched the video many times, but it's very, very cool. It was a big honor. I know Mark took it to heart, and we all did. So it's
dude, some couple like the other week just like got married to it. They like walked down the aisle to it, and
I saw that.
Yeah, pretty random.
That's dude.
Music is powerful stuff, man, and I definitely certainly wouldn't have tackled that tune if I thought you guys weren't the best dudes. That's the thing,
Well, likewise. We appreciate
Cheers,
it.
Dude. Cheers, dude. Pleasure to be a part of this, and it's a great thing you got going here, and all the best moving forward, both you guys. And Thanks. Justin as well.
Thanks, man. Real quick, so once we wrap up, just stay on the line so you and I can chat for 2 seconds after we hit the stop button. I think Jordan wanted to say one more thing, and then he's got to do his signature wrap up as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, Mike, I just want to say, for as impressive as a musician and businessman that you are, from this conversation, I take away that you're just as impressive of a human being. So we really appreciate you taking the time today. And I'll speak on behalf of our audience. Thank you for sharing your truth and your wisdom with all of us, man.
Oh, dude, that's really kind of you, man. Anytime. And I hope for anyone listening, you've taken something away from this. And if you want to reach out at any time for any advice about anything that I could possibly help with, just reach out on the socials or email or whatever, anytime. Just always happy to connect with like-minded people.
Awesome. And if you're haven't still yet connected with us at Chocolate Croissants on Facebook, you can add us and join the private group. It's facebook.com/group/chocolate croissants. That is where a true engagement really goes down. If you join and even just check out some of the conversations that have been going on, it's something where Matt, Justin, and I do our best to engage with everyone. But it's really cool to just see others take a leadership role and really help each other out. Again, if you found this to be of value today, we encourage you to go to iTunes and leave a review and a rating. It helps us a lot. You can also subscribe to the podcast, and that way every Monday morning it will show up in your podcast app of choice, and you won't have to think about downloading it. So again, we thank Mike Dawes for being an amazing guest, and we hope you guys have a great week. We will see you next Monday with another very inspiring guest. And until then, bye-bye.